What's up, everyone? Live here to break down and talk about the good old-fashioned college football slate tomorrow for the early main slate. So before we jump in and dive in, please hit that thumbs up. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Going to do it a little bit differently, just experimenting here. Going to kind of share my screen and just walk you through some of my favorite plays for this upcoming weekend. So before we do that, let's see here. Let me go ahead and remove this. Actually, I'm not going to share my screen because for whatever reason, it's not working properly. So, sorry, I lied. But we are still going to have a good show for you here. I'm going to break down each game, not diving in quite as much on, the full spectrum of spreads and all that kind of stuff. I'll give you the overview, but I want to just kind of give a quick breakdown. There's a few shows out there that do that stuff, but I want to talk to you about who my favorite plays are for Saturday. So we got a big slate here, 12 gamer. Right off the bat, we have a nice little Service Academy showdown, Air Force at Army. I think this is a game where Army is going to just completely steamroll these guys and should be a pretty good spot for us to attack. You look at where we're at just in general in terms of the two teams. Quarterback, we've got here Bryson Daly. He is coming in at 9,200, which is pretty expensive. But if you look at what he's done this year, man, he, I think, is in a very good spot against Air Force. Obviously, Air Force giving up a ton of points, a ton of rushing yards, a ton of throwing yards. But what Daly's done is just undeniable this season. You look at it, he's not going to absolutely bust anybody's doors down through the air. But man, this guy has gone over 100 yards. Let me just double check. All but one game, which was the first game of the season this year. And even in that one, he punched in 2 touchdowns on the ground. The last few weeks, I mean, he has rushed for 5 touchdowns, 4 touchdowns, 2, 3, and 3. He has gone, again, getting you that 100-yard bonus on the ground just about every game this season. And then through the air, he is like doing some damage, right? Like he's not going to throw for a ton of volume, but, he's throwing for a touchdown. Got 6 touchdowns last week. Throwing for a touchdown in 4 of his last 5 games. 2 of those, he went for double. So, man, this guy's just been absolutely elite, averaging about 39 points on DK per game. It's not very often we get a quarterback in a good matchup like this, and he is the 4th highest priced quarterback on the slate. So right off the bat, if we're looking at kind of that 9K and up, he is definitely my favorite play here if I'm spending up this week. When I'm looking at alternative people, I think Cam Ward definitely has to be considered. I got a sneaky feeling here. I think that Duke is going to play these guys pretty hard. It's an opportunity for Duke to obviously spoil Miami's season and really put them, who's been dancing with the devil a few times already on upset watch. But Miami at home, it should be a good bounce back spot for Ward. And I think they're going to need all 4 quarters here out of him. So I definitely have interest in both Cam Ward and Bryson Daly up top if you're paying up. Obviously, Cam Ward being 10-8 is a little bit more expensive. You're going to have to spend up to go get him. But he does have 30, 40-point upside, which we've seen this season. So I definitely have interest there. If you scroll down a little bit and starting to look through just kind of the price points here of guys that we have interest in, I do think Noah Fafita is interesting down here at 8,300. He gets a pretty miserable UCF defense. We saw Fafita pretty much all season has been very disappointing. I was really high on him coming into this season, but it hasn't quite clicked all year long. But we saw last week where he was chalk, and he absolutely exploded for 27 points, threw for 294, 2 touchdowns through the air, also rushed one in too. So I think in this matchup versus UCF, if UCF can just manage to make this a game offensively and keep this thing rolling, we do have sneaky shootout potential here, I think, in this Arizona UCF game. No interest on that side of the ball. They're just a mess offensively, especially at the quarterback position. So, I'm probably going to avoid that. I know I skipped over a few guys. I don't have a ton of interest in Jackson Dart. I think Arkansas is down, a few guys here. I think they should Ole Miss should handle these guys pretty well. 9,300 is just a big boy price tag, and I need ceiling if I'm paying that. And I just don't think Dart quite has that ceiling this week versus Ward and Daly. And the same thing goes for Dylan Gabriel, right? He's been really good. I don't know, man. Going into Michigan, Oregon's obviously the better team, but we have seen Michigan play, tough. I don't know. Again, we're talking ceilings here. We're talking tournaments. We're talking GPPs. I just don't really love this spot, for the Ducks. Again, I think they win pretty handedly here, but we've seen Oregon can do it multiple ways. And especially with Michigan just not being able to do anything offensively, like I just don't really, definitely don't see a shootout. But, and if this game stays close, that's a bad sign for Oregon, right? Offensively. So I definitely think, this could see this game like 28-7 or shoot, if Michigan can even muster 7 points here. But just not really the spot that I'm looking for. If you have James punch a few in on the ground, you see defensive touchdowns or something like that. I just don't quite see Gabriel hitting ceiling at that price tag. So I know I'm jumping around a little bit up here, up top, but it's Ward for me. It's Daly. Then I'm going down. Fafita, a little bit of interest in. Will Howard's interesting, 8,100. He's going to have to play well for Ohio State to win this game, no doubt about it. But being in Happy Valley, Penn State's going to be super revved up for this one. Once again, I think he's a fine play, like probably more cash game consideration for me. But again, we're talking ceiling, right? We need, and ideally 30 plus points here out of these guys if we're paying up. And I just think there's better options on the table and better matchups than Will Howard this week. If you go down a little bit, for example, a guy that I think has a much higher ceiling and potential, can nuke this thing is Avery Johnson for Kansas State at 8K. I'm going to have some Avery Johnson. You just see what he can do on the ground. If he can run a few of these things in, we've seen him go, 30 points, 39 points this year. I think Houston's an atrocious team. So I think you're much more likely to see Avery Johnson get to that 30-point plus mark than Will Howard this week. So if we're kind of dabbling in this low 8K range, Johnson's the guy for me. If we scroll down a little bit more, Carson Beck, not really any interest. We'll get to why here at the next position group. Seth Hennigan, I'm going to be playing the other side of that game, and we'll talk about it as we go down further. 7,600, I think you could just look to UTSA and play that side, in my opinion. So I'm not going to be really playing Seth Hennigan this week. Just kind of not really feeling it here. If you think that this game pops and shoots out, I think he's interesting in game stacks. But outside of that, I'm not going to be playing the Memphis side from the quarterback position. Taylon Green's always interesting, right? He gets a tough matchup, but Arkansas is at home. Ole Miss, we have seen them, kind of get shredded a little bit here. Taylon Green's just been the ultimate roller coaster, right? First 3 games of the season went absolutely nuts. Next 4 games was very pedestrian as competition got a little bit tougher against Auburn, A&M, Tennessee, and LSU. And then they play Mississippi State last week, and he goes for 50 points. So I don't think this is quite the spot that's going to happen. You might see some people chasing it. GPP only if you want to take shots there, but not really the week for me with Taylon Green. Going down a little bit more is where I'm going to start, having a little bit more interest. UCF side, like I said, no, not really going there. Drew Aller, no, not really going there. Again, I think that game is going to be your typical Big Ten kind of just knockout fight. There's going to be scoring, but not really what we want in terms of DFS. So I'll be locked into watching it, but not really where I'm going there playing wise. Below that, though, Curtis Rourke makes his return, it sounds like, and I do have some interest there. He's going to start versus Michigan State. And if you look at what Curtis Rourke has done all season, he's been very good. Very, very, very good. We've seen, mid-20s is kind of his like sweet spot. But we have seen him get up to 31, 32 points a few times here. I don't think Michigan State scares me whatsoever. In this spot, it is a road game. And I like the fact that in a sense, Rourke didn't play last week because it would be an ultimate letdown spot for Indiana here. But they've got a shot to do something pretty special. Rourke is obviously going to come in wanting to kind of reclaim his, his spot and obviously keep this thing rolling. So I'm going to have a little Curtis Rourke this week for sure. The next guy down, or 2 guys down, I should say, Rocco Becht is probably one of my favorite quarterbacks on the slate. He might be my highest owned quarterback. They get this Texas Tech defense that is, Texas Tech just doesn't play any defense. So Rocco Becht at home. We've seen Iowa State, definitely spread the ball around, throw it around. They've got two very consolidated receiving options, which I have interest in. And again, at home, Rocco Becht, one of my favorite quarterbacks on the slate. Moving down, I think the other guy that is drawing some interest for me for sure is Owen McCown for UTSA. Just look what he's done. He's been fantastic. Started out a little bit shaky, kind of roller coaster through the first 4 or 5 weeks, but the last three, again, I know competition quite hasn't been there, but 35 last week versus Tulsa, threw the ball 50 times. He has eclipsed that. Let's see, 49. He's gotten close a few times, 45, 43. So they're throwing the ball a lot more. I just really like this spot for McCown. His receiving options are very cheap and allows you to fit in some major studs all across the board. So for me at the quarterback position this week, my ownership, I should say, or my player pool is going to be Cam Ward, Bryson Daly. Let's see, scrolling down here. So yeah, Ward, Daly. I am going to have a little bit of interest in Avery Johnson. I am going to have some interest in Curtis Rourke, Rocco Becht, and I'm going to be playing some Owen McCown. That's my quarterback pool. I'm rolling with it. Gives me some high price guys, give me some cheap guys, mid-tier. So kind of all across the spending window, that's where I'm going. Moving to running back real quick, RJ Harvey up top, 9,300. It's a good spot for him. But once again, this UCF offense, man, is just start and stop, start and stop. I seem to only play RJ Harvey when he decides to put up 14 points, but there's no denying he put up 30 against a tough BYU team last week, 34 the week before that versus Iowa State. If you got the salary, I think he's a good play. I think same thing kind of goes for Darius Taylor. A little bit tougher of a matchup on the road versus Illinois. But these are big boy price tags, right? Same thing for James. If we're just talking the 5 or the 8K and above, I might have a little bit of it, but it's just not really the builds that I'm looking for this week, to be honest with you. My favorite guy that if I'm paying up is going to be Mario Anderson Jr. 7,800. He is definitely the guy that Memphis leans on all the way around. I just talked about the passing attack on the other side I like. This is my favorite bring back is Mario Anderson. He's the bell cow guy, had 32 touches last week, 22 the week before, is averaging 28 DraftKings points a game. Or a week, I'm sorry. Mario Anderson, for me, if I'm kind of quote unquote spending up, is going to be where I lean to. I think Giddens is also in a good spot. We talked about Avery Johnson from the running back position. He's always a good play. 7,600. I think if you got the money, those are the two guys I'm probably leaning the most towards if I'm paying up. Moving down a little bit, I'll take a few shots on Nick Singleton. I think Ohio State, obviously good defense, but we saw James get after him a little bit. They just do not give him the touches, man. I just wish Nick Singleton was a 20 touch guy a game because his talent level is undeniable. And he is a guy that can, against any team in the country, break off, a 70, 80-yard run to kind of change things. So I might have a few shares, but not really my favorite. My favorite plays are going to come right below him. I do have quite a bit of interest in Henry Parrish this week, 6,700. Good road matchup versus Arkansas. But my favorite play on the slate is, and probably my highest owned player is going to be Trevor Etienne. Georgia is definitely leaning on this guy. They had a week off after that Texas matchup where he punched in 3 touchdowns. They're also using him in the passing game a little bit. I think this is just a really good matchup for Etienne to get some revenge on his Gator brothers. So Etienne for me is going to be my highest owned player. I'm pretty confident in that. There's a few receivers that I'll have a lot of as well, but 6,500, man, for a bell cow home favorites in Georgia. It's hard to get away from him. My guess is he's going to be fairly, owned, but I don't really care. He's just in a good spot for me this week. Damian Martinez, Conley, right below him. I do have some interest in both of those guys. Mullings, not really. I know, he's got breakaway speed and he can do it, but just not really where I'm leaning to this week. I think there's better options, as I mentioned, above him. And I think right below him too. I think Star Thomas is a little bit better of a play in my opinion at 5,900. I talked about Duke being kind of having the ability to play spoiler this week. It's going to be through Thomas if they do it, kind of controlling this game and keeping Miami offense off the field. I think Kanye Udo is in a good spot as well. If you're not playing Bryson, 5,500 is a really good price tag for him. And if Army beats these guys, pretty badly, there's a shot that both of them do get there. 5,500 is a good price tag. I also like Justice Ellison right below him. So you're kind of seeing a trend. There's a few teams that I'm really locking onto this week, and I'm going to be playing mix and match. So, for example, on my non-Curtis Rourke teams, I like Ellison. On my non-Bryson teams, I like Udo. Non-Cam Warner teams, I like Damian Martinez, kind of so on and so forth. So outside of ETN, that's kind of how I'm going to be looking at the running back position this week a little bit. If you're going down a little bit more, you could look to Lawton, but my running back pool is pretty consolidated here. I think you could take some shots for Iowa State at Carson Hansen just because he's so cheap at 4,100. I think you could take some shots on Fletcher from Miami. He's getting work, 12, 13 carries a game, but I don't know, man. He hasn't really gotten there. And they also lean on Damian Martinez a little bit more in the red zone. I think the other guy you can look to is Robert Henry Jr. for UTSA, 4K flat. Saw 20 carries last week, 16 the week before. He's gone for almost 19 and 18 points the last two games. He's a really good salary saver, in my opinion. I think Henry for UTSA is interesting. But my running back pool is pretty tight this week, guys. That's kind of where I'm leaning, to be honest with you. At the receiver position, like always, lots of plays. We're waiting to hear on Trey Harris and what's going to happen there. Risky play just being for how expensive he is. I mean, let's just be honest. If 9,500 Trey Harris, you put him in and he doesn't play or he gets dinged up in the first quarter, your day's in major trouble and probably done. McMillan right below that, safer option, I think, in this one. Again, we talked about Fafita a little bit. I'll have some shots on McMillan because he is one of the rare guys on the slate in a good matchup that has very much 40-point upside. He did it last week. So I'm going to take some shots on him. Tez Johnson, always a good play, always Mr. Consistent. And I think, 7,700 is a good price tag for him. Ohio State, again, I talked about Will Howard a little bit, but I don't think Ohio State's going to beat Penn State on the ground. So if you think Jeremiah Smith is truly the next, Julio Jones or just generational type player, I don't really care who's playing corner for Penn State. I think you're going to see them try to lean on Jeremiah Smith and Igbuka a little bit here. I don't mind in tournaments taking shots on these guys because we've seen it before, even in tough games. These guys have 20 to 30 point upside for sure. On Tyler Warren, I don't know. I think very similar to the Penn State guy, the Ohio State guys. Just not really for me. I think if I am paying up, it's probably Restrepo or McMillan or Tez Johnson. Just better matchups overall, better teams. This Ohio State Penn State game is going to be tough, man. So not really my favorite. Going down a little bit, Higgins I love for Iowa State. I talked about Rocco Becht, who I like. I think Armstrong's a strong play here at 6,600. Rock Taylor from Memphis, he's in a good spot, but for me, I'm going to be paying down for some of these Memphis guys. I think Kelly, decent spot if you want to bring back for Iowa State. Noel, all right, so I talked about ETN's going to be my highest owned player. The only other guy that can really challenge that is Noel. 5,900, very much one of the two guys for Iowa State who I love, who could, is going to see targets for this team and they lean on him. Noel and Jackson for me are going to be very highly owned. I like both of those guys a lot. Surratt is in a good spot. Hopefully he's not very highly owned after what he did last week, but with with Rourke coming back, he should get back to what he was doing, which is absolutely rocking things. I think Horton is an interesting play if you want to take some shots on your Cam Ward teams. Douglas for Texas Tech has been great. I have interest in him. Kind of skipping over these Georgia guys just because, again, they spread the ball around a lot. Hudson, for me, I'm going to be kind of not really playing. I don't know. Again, UCF offense is just a mess. So probably not for me. When we're looking to go down here a little bit, I have some interest in Elijah Badger. Florida coming off a bye. Hopefully they got some things dialed up for him this week, especially with Eugene Wilson out. I like 4,300. It's a good price tag there. I think Zachary Franklin's interesting for Illinois. Going down, Jacoby George, 4K is kind of a steal for him, in my opinion, especially if you think Miami gets after these guys and Cam Ward does some damage. So, I know he's had some dud of games, but he's also, got 15, 16-point upside, 4K. I'll roll the dice on a few teams with George. Moving down, I think Nick Marsh at 4K flat is in a good spot versus Indiana on those bring back teams. It'll be interesting to see the Trey Harris news, but Watkins and Lee, obviously, if he misses especially, are get a boost here. 4K for Watkins, 3,900 for Lee. And then I think if you go down a little bit more, there's some more value in here. We've got, let's see, Carpenter for UTSA. He's a guy I have some interest in. He has seen, let's see, where is it? 7 catches last week and then 6, 6, and 6 before that. So at 3,700, I think Chris Carpenter's in a really, good play here this week, especially for those UTSA teams or as a bring back if you're playing the Memphis side. I think DK for Florida at 3,600 is in a good spot. Well, maybe I shouldn't say a good spot versus Georgia, but I'll have some, possible if you need a salary saver, dumpster diving, that's not the worst play in the world. I also think Montori Foster at 3,500 is interesting. And that pretty much does it for me. I think maybe Sam Brown for Miami if you want to go there. But we start really getting into some like YOLO shots when we get this low. So that's kind of my player pool, guys. Let me do one quick thing for you. I'm going to pull up just my current ownership on my exposure and who my favorite players are this week. Let's see. Internet is slow. All right, hold on. Give me a second. Chill out, everybody. All right, current exposure, still some more to build, but where I'm leaning so far, I have got. Wow, this is just a really good live stream, just on fire content. All right, as I said, ETN leading the charge for me is my highest owned player on the slate, followed by McCown and Rocco Becht. One guy I forgot, Willie McCoy for UTSA, 4,100. I've got a lot of him. He's in my top 5 or 6 guys of highest owned players. The Iowa State guys, Becht, Noel, Higgins, follow that. And then I've got Jackson for Minnesota and Ellison for Indiana. So those are my guys so far heading into, kind of my final builds as we approach the evening. And yeah, in full transparency, like always on the X machine and Twitter, I always post the morning of who my highest owned players are for the slate. So hopefully you're still with me. If you are, thank you for listening in. Hit that thumbs up again. Feel free to share, comment. If I missed anybody, please drop it in the comments. I love, absolutely learning and adapting if there's somebody that I glossed over. Other than that, good luck this weekend and let's cash it. Later.